He rang the bell like he used to when he was 16 and needed bail money. Not too loud, just insistent enough to make sure I was home. And I was. At 78, I'm always home. Where else would I be? It had been nearly a year since I'd seen my son. He hadn't called for Christmas, not even a text for my birthday. And now here he was, standing on my porch in that leather jacket that always looked too young on him, holding a paper bag from the bakery 2 streets over. "Hey, Ma," he said, like nothing had happened. Like we'd just spoken yesterday. I was in the neighborhood, thought I'd stop by. I opened the screen door slowly, still wearing my morning sweater and slippers. "You were in the neighborhood?" "Yeah," he said, shifting his weight. "Missed you." I let that hang in the air for a moment before stepping aside. "Well, come in then." The house smelled like lemon polish and old paperbacks. I'd just dusted the mantel that morning, and his father's photo sat there, as it always had, watching. Justin glanced at it, but didn't say a word. He never did. I led him to the kitchen, where the sunlight made the countertops look cleaner than they were. He set the bag on the table. Croissants, fancy ones with almond filling. I didn't touch them. "I thought we could talk," he said, and I poured him some tea. "About what?" I didn't ask. I waited. He talked. About his job. About how hard things had been. About missing family. The word caught in his mouth like it didn't quite belong there. Then came the softer parts. How the city made him tired. How he worried about me being alone. "You shouldn't be doing all this by yourself, Ma," he said, gesturing vaguely toward the sink. "I could help. Maybe come by more often." I studied his face. It had changed. Thinner. Lines I didn't recognize. His hair was cut sharp, like the boys in those downtown startups. But it was still Justin. My only son. The boy who used to read under the kitchen table. The man who forgot to call when I broke my hip 2 years ago. "I'm managing," I said simply. "I know." He nodded. "You always do. But maybe, I don't know, we could go over some stuff. Finances. Just so I know what's what. You know, in case anything ever happens." There it was. I didn't react. Just sipped my tea. He went on about helping with bills, about making sure the house is protected. I smiled without showing teeth. 40 years ago, his father and I had built this place together, nail by nail. No bank, no help, just sweat and stubbornness. "I'll think about it," I said. That seemed to satisfy him. He left an hour later with a kiss on my cheek and a promise to call next week. After he left, I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the untouched croissants. The light was softer now, filtering through the lace curtains. The kind of light that makes you remember things you didn't ask to. He said he missed me. Maybe he did. But he'd never cared about my accounts before, or asked where the house deed was kept. That night, I took the strongbox from my bedroom closet, the one with our marriage certificate, the will, the deed, Derek's discharge papers, everything that mattered. I counted each document, held them in my hands. Nothing was missing. Not yet. Justin came back 3 days later, this time with groceries. Not the kind I usually buy. There was oat milk, quinoa, some imported cheese I couldn't pronounce. He unloaded the bags like he'd done it 100 times before, putting things away in places they didn't belong. I didn't stop him. I just watched. "You don't have to do this," I said finally. He waved a hand. "It's nothing. I had a coupon. Figured you could use a few things." He opened the fridge, frowning at the jar of pickled beets I'd been working through for 2 weeks. "You need more fresh stuff," he muttered. I sat at the table with my tea, lukewarm and oversteeped. He kept moving, checking the pantry, rearranging the spice rack like he was planning to stay. I wondered if he was waiting for me to say it, that he was welcome, that I was happy. But I didn't say anything. After the fridge was rearranged and the groceries tucked into unfamiliar shelves, he sat across from me and looked around the kitchen like he was seeing it for the first time. "You've really kept the place nice," he said. "I've lived here longer than you've been alive," I replied. He smiled. "Still, it's solid." "A lot of folks our age downsize, move to condos or retirement places." I raised an eyebrow. He shifted, just thinking out loud. I knew that tone, that oily voice he used when he wanted to say something without saying it. It was the same voice he used the summer he borrowed money for a landscaping business that never got off the ground. The same voice he used when he said Veronica had some issues right before the divorce. "I like my house," I said. "Don't see any need to leave it." "No, of course not," he said quickly. "It's just, times are weird. With taxes and, fraud, elder scams. Thought maybe we could get things in order, just in case." "In case of what?" He blinked. "I don't know. Emergency." I let the silence do the talking. Eventually, he leaned forward, elbows on the table, fingers interlaced. "You ever think about getting someone to help you manage stuff? Like power of attorney or—" "No," I said. He nodded, like that made sense. Like it didn't rattle him at all. "I'm just trying to look out for you, Ma. I've looked out for myself for nearly 8 decades, I said. "I don't plan on stopping now." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You know I care, right? Do you?" That caught him. For a second, the mask slipped, just long enough for me to see whatever was underneath. It wasn't cruelty. It wasn't evil. It was just calculation, like I was a figure in a spreadsheet, a variable. He stood up. "I'll come by next week," he said. "Don't bring groceries," I replied. "I still know how to shop." That night, I pulled out the strongbox again, just to be sure. Everything was still there, but I took the deed out and slipped it into the lining of my winter coat, just in case. The next morning, I walked down to the corner store and made small talk with Gloria, the cashier who always double-bagged my milk. Then I stopped by the post office to pick up my mail. There was a thin envelope from the county recorder's office. I hadn't requested anything. Back home, I opened it slowly. Inside was a notice confirming a change of address request for my property. I hadn't filed one. The paper trembled slightly in my hands, though I kept my grip firm. The county recorder's seal stared back at me like an accusation. Someone had filed a change of address request linked to my house. My house. I read the form again, slower this time. The new mailing address wasn't familiar. An apartment complex in a different part of town. Somewhere I'd never been, never written down, never had reason to. My first thought was, mistake. A clerical error, perhaps. These things happen. But no. The name listed as the authorized requester was too familiar. Justin M. Brimley. He'd used his full name. Always does when he wants to look official. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. Then I stood there for a long moment in the middle of my living room, surrounded by all the years I'd spent building a life. The curtains I'd sewn by hand in '89. The bookshelf Derek made when we still thought refinishing wood was a romantic weekend project. The framed certificate from the local paper naming me Neighborhood Volunteer of the Year, now a little sun-faded but still visible. I wasn't stupid. I'd lived long enough to know what it meant when people started asking about paperwork, using words like, in case of emergency, bringing groceries with one hand and reaching for something with the other. I'd seen it happen to others. Quietly. Subtly. Often behind closed doors in homes just like mine. Still, I needed proof. I made 2 phone calls that afternoon. The first was to the county recorder's office just to confirm. A polite young man named Kyle told me, yes, the change had been processed online, with all appropriate documentation attached. He couldn't share more without a formal request, but he sounded uncomfortable, like he knew something was off. The second call was to Carol Ann, my neighbor of 30 years. She answered on the third ring, her voice warm as always. "Helly, you okay? Did you see anyone at my house last Tuesday, in the afternoon?" There was a pause. "You mean besides Justin?" My chest tightened. "He was here?" "Yeah, I figured you were home. He was carrying a folder and had a woman with him. Short hair, nice blazer. I assumed she was from the bank or something. You didn't know?" "No," I said, and my voice came out quieter than I meant. "Oh, Helen. It's okay. Thank you, Carol." I hung up before the sympathy in her voice cracked whatever composure I had left. So he hadn't just been checking in. He'd brought someone who needed access. And I'd been out at my doctor's appointment, getting a blood pressure refill and picking up cough drops. That evening, I didn't touch dinner. I made tea, but let it go cold. The house was too quiet. Not peaceful, just still, like it was waiting for me to say something. Around 8:30, I went to the closet, took out the strongbox again, and laid the documents out in careful rows on the kitchen table. The deed was gone. I checked every file, every folder, even the envelope in the lining of my winter coat. The one I'd moved it to days before? It wasn't there. Not tucked behind the will, not under Derek's papers. Not anywhere. I sat down in the chair, the one with the worn cushion that used to be Derek's favorite. My hands were cold. I wasn't ready to panic, not yet. But I was done waiting. I didn't sleep that night. Not properly. I lay in bed listening to the soft hum of the old refrigerator down the hall, the wind brushing against the side of the house, and the occasional creak of the floorboards that settled louder in silence. This house knew me better than anyone, and now someone had tried to take it from me. At 7:05 the next morning, I called the law office Derek and I had used when we wrote our first will. They were still in business. Different name on the door now, but same address. A young woman named Emily answered and transferred me to a Mr. Feldman, who, from the sound of his voice, had been practicing since the Reagan years. "I need to verify the status of my deed," I said plainly, "and I need to know if any transfer has taken place without my knowledge or consent." Mr. Feldman asked me to come in with ID and any documentation I had. I told him I'd be there by 10. I dressed slowly, deliberately, not in anger, not in panic, but in something steadier. I wore the slate gray coat with deep pockets, the one with the soft lining. Derek used to say it made me look 10 years more formidable. I needed every year of that now. At the office, Mr. Feldman met me in a modest room with wood-paneled walls and chairs that creaked too easily. He offered me water, which I declined, and then he began sifting through the papers I'd brought in a manila envelope. When he looked up, he wasn't smiling. "Mrs. Brimley," he said slowly, "there's been a recent filing showing a transfer of title to your property. It was processed electronically, but the forms appear formal, notarized, complete. To whom? To a Justin Michael Brimley, your son." I closed my eyes for half a second. "And the signature?" I asked. There's a power of attorney document attached, dated 2 weeks ago. It grants him the authority to manage and sign property transfers on your behalf. I met his eyes. I never gave him that power, not knowingly. Mr. Feldman tapped the papers with the edge of his pen. It would require notarization to be valid. I sat back in the chair, the fabric pressing into my shoulder blades. Then someone faked my consent, or someone tricked me. It wasn't the first possibility that scared me. It was the second. I thought back. Justin had been here almost every other day that week. Once he'd come by in the evening, saying he had some documents to show me. Something about a new medical directive, just a form to make sure the hospital knew who to call. We hadn't signed anything then. Or had we? I need a copy, I said. Of everything. I can print that for you now, he replied. And I recommend you file a dispute immediately. This isn't a matter for delay. Outside the office, the wind had picked up. My coat flapped as I walked back to the car. I'd parked 3 blocks away on purpose. I needed the air. When I got home, I stood in the hallway a moment before I entered the kitchen. I looked at the chair Justin had sat in days earlier, sipping tea and saying he missed me, that he wanted to help. He had helped himself, to everything. I placed the stack of printed documents in the center of the kitchen table, next to the cold remains of yesterday's tea. Justin's signature was clear, his writing unmistakable. Next to it, mine, or something that looked like mine, and below it, the seal of a notary I'd never met. I picked up the phone and dialed his number. It rang 4 times, then voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I wasn't ready for words yet. I needed to find that notary. The notary's name was printed clearly beneath the seal. L. Ramirez, commission number, expiration date, and a business address downtown. One of those shared office suites where professionals come and go like rotating tenants. It took me 15 minutes to find the phone number, another 10 to work up the nerve to dial. A woman answered. Cheerful, rehearsed. Notary Services of Midtown, this is Letitia. I cleared my throat. Yes, hello. My name is Helen Brimley. I believe you recently notarized a power of attorney document listing me as the principal and my son, Justin Brimley, as the agent. There was a pause. I'm sorry, she said. We're not allowed to discuss notarizations over the phone without proper verification. Privacy policies. I understand, I replied, but I need to know. Did I come into your office? Did you notarize my signature personally? She hesitated. Ma'am, unless you come in with ID, I can't confirm or deny anything. Her tone wasn't unkind, just bound by protocol. I'll be there today, I said, and hung up. It took me an hour to get downtown. The elevator in the building smelled like floor polish and indecision. Suite 403 was a narrow room with 2 desks, a potted plant that needed watering, and a receptionist who looked up from her phone just long enough to wave me toward the back. Letitia Ramirez was younger than I expected. Late 30s, maybe early 40s. Clean-cut, professional, dressed in gray slacks and a sweater set. She stood when I entered and extended her hand. I remember you now, she said after checking my name. Mrs. Brimley, you signed the documents in your home. Your son requested a mobile service. I came with him. It was maybe 2 weeks ago? My blood ran cold. I never met you, I said. She blinked. Ma'am, I was in your kitchen. You signed 3 documents. One of them was a power of attorney. That's not possible, I replied. I wasn't home. I was at the doctor's that day. I have the appointment card. She hesitated, brows knitting together. Then someone else signed, I said quietly. Someone pretending to be me. Her mouth opened, then closed. I always ask for ID. I reached into my purse and pulled out my license. Held it up to her. Do you recognize this face? She stared. After a long pause, she sank into her chair. Oh, God, she whispered. We sat in silence for a moment while she pressed her fingers to her temples. I thought something was off, she said finally. She didn't talk much, just nodded. But your son, he was very confident. Did she show ID? She didn't answer. That told me everything. I stood up slowly. My legs weren't as steady as they'd once been, but I didn't show it. I'll be filing a report, I said calmly. She looked up, shame coloring her cheeks. I understand. Outside, the city felt colder. The breeze hit sharper. I made it back to my car and sat for a moment before turning the key in the ignition. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was methodical. A woman who once balanced 6 laundromats on a yellow notepad and never bounced a single check. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I had a plan forming in my head. I'd start with my attorney, then the police, then the financial institutions. I would leave nothing assumed, nothing unspoken. And somewhere in that process, I'd be speaking to Justin again, but not as a mother, as a woman who'd just been robbed. I went straight to Mr. Feldman's office the next morning. No appointment, no call ahead. His secretary gave me a look when I walked in, the kind usually reserved for people without boundaries or good news. But he saw me anyway. When I placed the forged power of attorney and the name of the notary on his desk, he didn't ask for context. He just put on his glasses and read in silence. This, he said slowly, is going to be a mess. I've handled worse, I replied. I just need to know where to start. He pulled out a legal pad and began writing. First, we file a formal complaint with the Secretary of State's office against the notary. That's administrative, but important. If what you're saying is true, it means fraud on both ends. It is true, I said. She confirmed it. She notarized a stranger. He nodded. Second, we go to the county clerk to dispute the deed transfer. If the power of attorney is void, then the deed itself becomes contestable. But we need to move fast. If your son tries to sell or refinance, he won't get the chance. Feldman gave me a look, one part admiration, one part caution. Third, he said, you'll need to go to the police. File a criminal complaint. This is identity theft, Helen, real and prosecutable. The word criminal echoed more than I expected. I didn't like it. I didn't want to be the kind of mother who brought her son's name into police reports. But then again, I hadn't planned on being the kind of mother whose name was stolen from her own deed. We filed the notary complaint together. Feldman's assistant scanned all the documents, attached the witness statements, even printed out my doctor's appointment confirmation. Every detail, every timestamp. Then I drove to the police station. There's a particular kind of silence in a station lobby. It's not quite fear, not quite tension, just waiting. People waiting to explain things they shouldn't have to explain. I was one of them now. A young officer with a shaved head and steady eyes listened to my story, taking notes as I spoke. Your son filed this without your knowledge? He asked. Yes. And you never signed these papers? No. He nodded slowly, tapping the pen against the desk. Do you have reason to believe he might attempt to sell the home or leverage it? I have reason to believe he already planned to. The officer leaned back. We can open a report. You'll get a case number. Fraud Division will follow up. I thanked him, took the paperwork, and walked out. The sun had come up higher since I arrived. It made the pavement shimmer. I didn't feel relief. Not exactly. But I felt motion, like something had finally shifted after days of silence. At home, I found the envelope Justin had once brought the croissants in, still folded neatly in the pantry. I almost laughed. What a gesture. What a show. The phone rang just after 3 p.m. Unknown number. I answered. "Mom?" his voice said, too casual. "Hey, I've been meaning to call. Everything okay?" He didn't know yet. "Fine," I said. "How are you?" A pause. "I'm good. Busy. Just a lot going on." "I can imagine." Another pause. "I've been thinking. We should meet. Go over some things. I talked to a guy about—" "I already know," I said. Silence now. "I know about the documents, Justin. The notary. The forged signature. I know everything." For a few seconds I heard only breath. "Mom, wait, let me—" "I've already filed with the police." His breath caught. "You— What? You went to the cops?" "Yes." "You didn't have to." "Mom, I was just—" "You were just what?" I said, my voice even. "Helping? Planning for emergencies? Protecting me?" A sharp exhale on the line. "You don't understand." "You're right," I said. "I don't." I hung up. The phone rang again immediately. I let it ring. The next morning brought a silence that felt different. Not peaceful, not empty. It was the quiet that comes after something breaks. I woke early, made tea out of habit, and stared at the steam curling above the cup. My hands were steady now, not because I wasn't angry, but because the waiting part was over. Around 10, the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw her. A girl with auburn curls tucked under a gray knit hat, a tote bag slung over her shoulder. She waved when she caught sight of my face behind the curtain. "Grandma." It was Clara. My granddaughter. Justin's daughter from his first marriage. The only one in the family who still sent birthday cards with handwritten notes and visited without expecting something in return. I opened the door. She stepped inside, looking worried. "I tried calling you yesterday, but it kept going to voicemail." "I turned the phone off," I said. She nodded like she understood more than she should. "I saw Dad last night," she said. He was pacing outside his car, muttering to himself. "When I asked what was wrong, he said you were confused, that you'd gotten it in your head that he stole something." My throat tightened. "And what did you say?" "I told him I've never seen you confused a day in my life." I smiled. "Good." She followed me into the kitchen, dropped her bag, and pulled off her coat. "So, tell me everything. What did he do?" I slid the folder across the table. The forged power of attorney. The notary complaint. The police report. She read without interrupting, eyes widening by degrees. "Holy hell," she whispered. He tried to take the house?" I nodded. Her face flushed with a hot, quiet rage I hadn't seen since she was 10, and got suspended for punching a boy who called another girl fat. She had her mother's temper, sharp, fast, and justified. "Does he think you're helpless?" she snapped. "He knows you ran 3 businesses. You paid for his first apartment. God, this is insane." I placed a hand on hers. "He thinks I'm alone." Clara's eyes softened. "You're not." That evening, she drove me back to Mr. Feldman's office. We needed to add her to the file as a contact, someone who could communicate on my behalf, if necessary. Not with power, not with control, just with presence. Feldman raised an eyebrow when he saw her. "Family?" "My granddaughter," I said. "She's sharp." "Better with computers than I'll ever be." Clara shook his hand with a steady grip. As we left, I caught sight of our reflection in the office window, her youth, my age, our faces next to each other in the glass. The contrast should have made me feel small. Instead, I felt rooted. I wasn't doing this alone anymore. At home, we had dinner. Soup and toast, nothing fancy. Clara stayed late, helping me sort papers, scan documents, even set up a folder on my laptop with passwords she insisted I memorize. When she was ready to leave, she hugged me tightly. "I'm not going to let him get away with this," she said. "I'm not either," I replied. "But I'm glad you're here." After she left, I sat back at the kitchen table, the old clock ticking steadily behind me. The shadows in the room had changed, longer, softer, but they didn't scare me anymore. I wasn't the kind of woman who let herself be erased, and I sure as hell wasn't going to start now. The letter from the county clerk arrived 3 days later. I'd been checking the mailbox like clockwork, even though I knew it wouldn't come fast. Still, when I saw the official seal on the envelope, my pulse quickened. Inside was a single-page notice. Deed dispute under review. Temporary hold placed on property transfer. It wasn't a victory, not yet, but it was the first foothold in a steep climb. Clara came over that evening after her shift at the library. She read the letter twice, her brow furrowed, and then grinned. He won't be able to sell or take out loans. That's something. He shouldn't have been able to in the first place. I know. She made tea while I sat at the table, staring out the window. It was just after sunset, and the last light clung to the rooftops like an apology. "I've been thinking," I said. He must have had a plan. This wasn't some impulse. He filed a change of address. He brought that woman here while I was out. He must have been waiting for the right moment. "Probably after you passed," Clara said quietly. "Or maybe sooner, depending on how greedy he was feeling." The words stung, not because she was wrong, but because she said it so plainly. I remembered Justin as a boy, climbing trees barefoot and begging for extra jam. That boy had vanished long ago, replaced by a man I didn't recognize, even when he smiled like nothing had happened. "People like your father," I said slowly. "They think affection is a form of leverage. They give a little warmth and expect a signature in return." Clara nodded, placing a cup in front of me. "Well, now he knows he miscalculated." The next morning, I followed up with the detective assigned to my case, a woman named Adair, whose voice carried the weight of someone who'd heard too many stories that sounded just like mine. "I'm not surprised," she said, after hearing the details. "Elder financial abuse cases are on the rise. We've got 5 this month already." "Does anything happen to them?" I asked. "If there's proof, yes, but it takes time, patience." "I've waited long enough." She chuckled softly. "Then we'll move quickly." She asked for a sworn statement. I typed it out myself, printed it, and signed it with a pen that didn't tremble. Clara notarized it at the library. Adair said she'd begin reviewing the notary's conduct for possible prosecution, especially if other complaints emerged. That night, I received a message from Justin. It came through email, of all things. Subject: "Can we please talk?" Message: "Mom, this is all a huge misunderstanding. I never meant for things to go this way. Please, just call me. We can fix this. Don't involve the police. It'll ruin everything. Love, Justin." I stared at the words. Love, Justin. I didn't respond. The next day, Clara helped me draft a formal revocation of any power of attorney, valid or forged, and we filed it with the county. Feldman sent copies to every bank where I had accounts. We flagged everything. He even recommended switching institutions just in case. By the end of the week, the house was quiet again, but different. Not vulnerable, not passive. The air felt clean. The locks changed. The safe moved. I made a pot of soup that evening, potato and leek, and ate alone by the window. The wind had picked up again, rattling the old shutters. I used to hate that sound, afraid it meant something was coming loose. Now, I welcomed it. Let the wind rattle. Let it try. This house stood through worse. And so have I. The knock came late. Too late for visitors. Just past 9 p.m., after I'd finished the dishes and turned off the television. I froze in the hallway, the sound echoing louder than it should have in a house that had just begun to feel safe again. I didn't move right away. Then I turned on the porch light and peeked through the side curtain. Justin. He wasn't alone. A woman stood next to him. Tall, sharp-boned, dressed in something that tried to say professional, but landed closer to expensive discomfort. Her arms were crossed. She didn't look like someone dragged into a mess. She looked like someone who thought she could clean one up. I opened the door but didn't step aside. "Evening," I said. "Ma," Justin started. "Can we come in?" "No." He blinked. The woman spoke up. "Mrs. Brimley, I'm Victoria Jansen. I'm a family advisor. I've worked with Justin on some personal matters. We just want to clear the air." "Are you a lawyer?" I asked. "No," she said, "but—" "Then you can speak from the porch." Justin looked like he wanted to argue but thought better of it. I could see his jaw working. He always had trouble hiding frustration when people didn't behave as expected. Victoria smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "There's clearly been a misunderstanding," she began. "Justin tells me you're upset about some documents, but everything was filed in good faith." "Forging a signature isn't good faith." "I'm sure no one meant to mislead you." I raised an eyebrow. "You're sure?" Justin stepped forward. "Mom, please. This is getting out of control. Police reports, lawyers. You're blowing this up. We could lose everything." "Whose everything are we talking about?" I asked. "Because I haven't lost a thing. You have. Or you will." Victoria glanced at him, a flicker of doubt passing between them. "I'm your son," he said. "I've made mistakes, but I didn't think you'd try to destroy me." I looked him in the eye. "You tried to erase me from my own house." "You don't understand how tight things have been," he snapped. "You live in this paid-off house with no bills. I'm drowning. I have 2 kids in school. I thought maybe it was time the house started doing something for someone." "Someone," I repeated. "Being you." He looked down. That was the only truth he was willing to admit. "I gave you things," I said. "Years of them. Support, money, forgiveness. I handed you your second chance after the first one got spent on bottle caps and bad business." "Mom!" "You don't get to play the victim now." The woman spoke again, her voice smooth. "Mrs. Brimley, is there anything Justin can do to repair this?" "He can start by walking off my porch." Silence. Justin opened his mouth, then shut it again. His shoulders slumped. He turned without a word and stepped back onto the walkway. Victoria lingered a second longer, then gave me a look that might have been pity or disappointment. I didn't care which. When I closed the door, the house felt warmer. Not because of what I'd said, but because of what I hadn't allowed. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I stood there until their car pulled away, headlights sweeping across the street like a pair of questions that would never get answered. In the quiet that followed, I went into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My reflection in the window looked older than it had last week, but it also looked clear, uncompromised. The phone rang once, then stopped. I didn't check to see who it was. Whatever came next, I was ready. 3 days passed without a word. No calls, no visits, no emails filled with false apologies or clumsy justifications. It was as if Justin had vanished, or more likely, retreated, regrouping with whatever family advisor thought I could be reasoned into silence. I used those 3 days well. Clara and I met with Mr. Feldman again. He had filed a petition for nullification of the property transfer, citing fraudulent execution of the power of attorney and misrepresentation. The notary complaint had been escalated. Leticia Ramirez was now under formal review, and the Secretary of State's office had contacted me directly. They wanted a sworn affidavit and a follow-up interview. I provided both. Clara insisted we document everything. She brought over a brand new file folder and labeled it in her careful print. House, legal response. Each section had tabs: deed, POA, notary, county clerk, police report, correspondence. I want to make sure there's no way he can ever pull this again, she said, sliding papers into place like she'd done it her whole life. People like him, they bank on chaos. We'll give him order. I watched her with something like awe. This woman, was 23 and already knew more about justice than her father ever had. That night, as she packed up to leave, she turned to me at the door. "Grandma," she said, "do you think he'll try something else?" I didn't answer right away. "He's quiet now," I said. "But it's not regret. It's calculation. He's waiting for a weakness." She nodded grimly. "Then let's not give him one." After she left, I made a cup of tea and sat in the living room. I didn't turn on the television. I just listened. To the quiet hum of the heater, the wind brushing dry leaves across the sidewalk outside, and my own breath, steady, unbroken. And that's when it came. A knock. Not at the door. At the window. I stood slowly, heart suddenly aware of itself. Through the curtains, I saw a figure. Shorter than Justin, lighter hair. Then a voice, muffled but unmistakable. "Grandma? It's me. Clara." I opened the door in seconds. "What on earth?" She looked flustered, flushed from the cold, her coat half zipped. She held her phone in her hand. "I just got a message from Dad," she said. I think you need to see it." She held out the screen. I read, "You need to stop helping her. She's making this worse than it has to be. If she files that affidavit, we both know it'll ruin everything. You're choosing sides now. That comes with consequences." I handed the phone back, the taste of old bitterness rising in my throat. "He's threatening you," I said. She nodded. I motioned her inside. "Come on. We're calling the detective." Detective Adair didn't answer, but I left a message, clear and direct. Clara forwarded the message. We backed it up on her laptop. Time-stamped, screenshot, dated. He wanted to play intimidation? He'd picked the wrong pair of women. We spent the next hour talking, not just about legal steps, but the emotional ones. The realization that someone you trusted had bet on your silence, your fear, your exhaustion. Clara's hands trembled once, then stopped. "He always did this," she said. "When I was a kid, if I didn't want to stay at his house, he'd call Mom and say I was being difficult. If I asked for space, he'd make me feel guilty." "I know," I said. "He learned early that pressure works, until it doesn't." We sat in quiet understanding, and something passed between us. Not just solidarity, but something stronger. like legacy, redefined. I walked her to her car near midnight. The street was quiet, just the two of us beneath the yellow cast of the porch light. "Promise me," she said, turning to look at me before getting in. "If anything else happens, anything at all, you'll call me." "I promise," I said. And I meant it. Because this wasn't just my fight anymore. It was ours. Detective Adair called back the next morning. Her voice was calm, but there was a new edge to it. The kind that only shows up when patience runs out. "I saw the message," she said. "And I'm escalating this. We're moving into criminal investigation territory. Witness intimidation, potential fraud, forgery. It's all on the table now." I thanked her. Not because I needed reassurance, but because I knew what it meant for someone in her position to treat an elderly woman's story with weight. "You've done everything right, Mrs. Brimley," she added. "Keep your distance. Don't respond to him. We'll handle it from here." I hung up and sat in the kitchen, staring at the notepad where Clara had written the week's appointments. Legal meetings, bank visits, a check-in with the insurance broker. My life had become an itinerary of damage control. And still, somehow, I was sleeping better. That afternoon, Clara arrived with a look in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Something between curiosity and quiet fury. "I found something," she said, dropping her laptop bag on the table. I went through the property records for Justin's supposed new address, the one he used when he filed the change of address on your deed. She opened her laptop and turned the screen toward me. A real estate listing, a condo, under contract. "In his name?" "No, in the name of a shell company. But the listing agent is someone Dad used to work with. He was trying to move fast, Grandma. Probably planned to sell your house and use the equity for this." I stared at the screen. The condo was sterile. Chrome fixtures, glass balconies, soulless lighting. The opposite of the home I'd built board by board with Derek. "Did you send this to Detective Adair?" "Already done." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I don't know what I did to deserve you," I said. Clara blinked hard and laughed through her nose. "Probably not what you did. Probably what you didn't do." That night, I retrieved a box from the hall closet. The one marked "Legal Personal" in Derek's handwriting. It still smelled faintly of cedar and old paper. Inside were letters, contracts, a few clippings from the early years of our laundromat, and tucked beneath it all, a single page. A handwritten list. It was dated 1997. "If anything ever happens to me, Helen, trust your instincts. Keep control of the house. Always. Don't let Justin sweet-talk you into anything. He's got charm, but no breaks. Give him what you can afford to lose. Nothing more. Remember, you built this too." I ran my fingers over his writing. Derek had known. Not this exact betrayal, not this level, but something in our son had always made him cautious. I hadn't wanted to see it then. I do now. The next morning, Clara drove me to a community mediation center, not to reconcile, but to file a statement blocking any future mediation attempts. Justin had apparently requested a hearing, trying to make it look like a family dispute instead of a criminal matter. He wanted to negotiate. He wanted neutral ground. There would be none. We signed the paperwork. I added a line in my own words. "I do not consent to any private settlement. This matter is now in the hands of law enforcement and legal counsel." Later that day, we stopped for coffee. Clara leaned back in her chair, stirring cream into her cup. "He's going to be furious," she said. "Let him be." He might show up again. I smiled. Let him try. Because the door he used to knock on without asking, it was bolted now, with locks I had chosen, boundaries I had drawn, and a granddaughter who knew how to hold the line. Let him pace. Let him stew. This house, this name, this life, they were mine. And no one was going to sign them away again. The hearing date arrived with little fanfare. Just a letter in the mail, a docket number, and a time. 9:15 a.m. on a Wednesday that smelled like rain. I dressed with care that morning. Not for vanity, for clarity. A dark navy skirt suit I hadn't worn since Derek's funeral, low-heeled shoes, and the same pearl earrings I wore when Justin was born. Clara picked me up at 8 sharp. She wore a blazer and flats, her curls pulled back tight. Her silence in the car wasn't nervous. It was focused. I printed out everything, she said, holding up a binder as we pulled into the courthouse parking lot. I know Mr. Feldman's handling it, but I wanted backup. You're my backup, I said. That's more than enough. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Just 2 rows of benches, a modest desk for the judge, and an atmosphere of restrained tension. Mr. Feldman sat with us, flipping through notes. Across the aisle, Justin walked in wearing a pressed shirt and a face full of rehearsed humility. He didn't look at me. Not once. The judge was a woman in her 60s with steel-colored hair and eyes that missed nothing. She read the file silently, glasses perched at the tip of her nose. Then she looked up. This case involves an alleged fraudulent transfer of residential property, executed via power of attorney under contested circumstances. Mrs. Brimley, you are stating this transfer occurred without your consent? I am, I said, voice steady. And you've submitted an affidavit to that effect, including notarized medical appointment records confirming your absence from the home on the date of signing? Yes. The judge nodded, then turned to Justin. Mr. Brimley, do you contest your mother's statement? He cleared his throat, trying to look regretful. Your Honor, I believe there's been a miscommunication. I did have documents notarized, but my intention was to help manage the home in her interest. I didn't realize there was confusion. You filed a property transfer, she interrupted, changing the deed into your name. That's not management, that's ownership. He shifted. I thought she agreed. We discussed it. Did she sign in front of a notary? He hesitated. The judge raised an eyebrow. Mr. Brimley, your notary has since admitted to verifying the signature without checking ID and has been reported for misconduct. That places the validity of your claim in question. He didn't answer. I'm issuing a temporary injunction against any further transaction related to the property in question, she said firmly, and I am referring the matter to the district attorney's office for potential charges. In the meantime, the original deed will be reinstated under Mrs. Brimley's name, pending formal resolution. It was done. Not over, not fully, but done enough. Outside, Clara hugged me tight. Feldman shook my hand with real satisfaction in his grip. Justin stood by the curb, pretending to check his phone. His face was pale, lips tight. For a moment, I thought he might say something. Apologize. Plead. Rewind what had been done. But he didn't. He just walked away. And I let him. That night, the house was warmer than it had been in months. I opened the window in the kitchen to let in the breeze, brewed chamomile tea, and sat at the table. The deed would arrive in the mail again, soon. My name, my signature. No footnotes. Clara texted just before bed. You were brilliant today. I'm proud of you. I stared at the words for a long time. I had spent a lifetime being useful, generous, quiet. And now, in the dusk of it, I was finally being something else. Heard. The rest would come. The fallout, the paperwork, the bruised remnants of family. But I would face all of it. In my home, on my terms. No signatures stolen. No rights revoked. Not anymore. He called one final time. It was a week after the hearing. The house had settled into a kind of stillness again, not the eerie kind that came with suspicion, but the earned calm of something defended. I was folding laundry in the den when the phone rang. I let it ring twice before answering. Hello? There was a pause. Ma. His voice was low, hollow. No performance this time. I waited. I just wanted to say. He trailed off, as if even now the sentence cost him something. I didn't think it'd get this far. It didn't get this far, Justin, I said, voice measured. You brought it this far. He sighed, and I heard movement. Maybe he was pacing, or maybe just trying to fill the silence between us. I'm going to lose a lot. You already did. That landed. He didn't argue. I was desperate, he said. And I was your mother, I replied. Not a checkbook, not a deed, a person. He said nothing. I came to you for help, Ma. You turned it into a war. Now I laughed, quietly, without humor. You came to me with forged papers and a stranger in my house. That wasn't a cry for help. That was a strategy. I'm still your son. Yes, I said, and I'll always carry the ache of that. But I won't carry the damage anymore. There was a long pause. Then, you'll never speak to me again? I didn't say that, but I won't pretend you didn't try to erase me, and I won't pretend to feel safe around you. He let out a breath, long and heavy. Then he said, Goodbye, Ma. Goodbye, Justin. He hung up first. I stood still, listening to the quiet hum of the old refrigerator, the ticking clock above the doorway. The house hadn't changed, not really. But something in me had shifted. Later that day, Clara stopped by with a plant. A peace lily in a ceramic pot. You didn't have to bring anything, I said. I know, she replied. But I wanted to mark it. What you did. We had tea and sat in the garden, the autumn light settling on the brick path like a soft blanket. I talked to a friend, she said suddenly. She's in law school. She said your case is already being used in their elder law seminar. God help them, I said, and we both laughed. But seriously, Clara continued, you stood up. You made it official. That matters. I looked around the yard, the rosebush Derek had planted, the bird feeder we'd rebuilt last spring, the soil still rich with the labor of ordinary years. It wasn't about proving anything, I said. It was about keeping what was mine, what I built, what I chose. Clara nodded. And you did. We were quiet for a while. Then she asked, Do you think he meant the goodbye? I think he meant it in that moment, I said. But with Justin, moments shift. That evening, I watered the lily and placed it on the kitchen windowsill. It caught the last light of the day, its broad leaves soft in the glow. I didn't know if Justin would ever call again. I didn't know if the legal aftermath would take weeks or months to sort. But I knew this. He no longer had the keys. To the house, to my trust, to my silence. And that, more than anything, was the start of something new. The final court documents arrived in a plain white envelope with a thick seal and no ceremony. Inside, confirmation of deed reinstatement. Full ownership returned to my name. The fraudulent transfer formally nullified. There was no fanfare, no letter of apology, no explanation. just ink on paper, and my name where it had always belonged. I sat at the table and read it twice, then once more out loud, letting the words settle in the air of my kitchen like dust after a storm. It was over, at least on paper. Clara came by that evening with groceries and her usual gentle check-ins. "Have you opened it?" she asked. "I have," I said. "And?" "It's done." She smiled but didn't cheer. She knew better than to treat this like a win in the traditional sense. We both knew the cost. My trust. My son. The long, invisible fracture between the past and what it became. We ate dinner quietly. Chicken stew, crusty bread, tea. No interruptions, no calls. Afterward, we sat in the living room, the documents spread out on the coffee table, neat and final. "You know," Clara said, "you could talk to the papers. They'd publish it." Elder fraud, forged documents? You'd be doing others a favor. "I thought about that," I admitted. "But I don't want to be a cautionary tale. I want to be a reminder." A reminder of what? That dignity doesn't expire with age. That silence isn't always forgiveness. That no one, not even your child, has the right to write you out of your own life. Clara sat with that for a while, then nodded. "Then maybe you should still write it. Your version." We left the idea on the table, like dessert we were too full to eat, but not ready to put away. That night, I sat by the window and watched the neighborhood go quiet. Porch lights flicked off one by one. The Johnsons across the street walked their dog. A teenager zipped by on a skateboard. Somewhere, wind chimes rang in the distance. I thought of all the women like me, the ones who'd been told to be nice, to be quiet, to be understanding, the ones whose signatures were stolen not just from paper, but from memory. And I thought of all the ways we take ourselves back, not loudly, not violently, but with persistence, with truth, and with the unshakable understanding that we are not things to be passed down. We are not land, not real estate. We are the foundation. 2 days later, a letter arrived from Leticia Ramirez, the notary. It was handwritten, on lined paper. "Mrs. Brimley, I'm sorry. I failed my job, and worse, I failed you. I should have asked more questions. I should have trusted my instincts. I let a confident man convince me that something wrong was routine. I've surrendered my commission and accepted full responsibility in the state's investigation. I hope you can forgive me one day. L. Ramirez." I read it once, then again. It wasn't absolution, but it was rare, the kind of accountability most people don't offer, even when caught. I folded the letter, placed it in the file under notary, and wrote across the top of the page, "Acknowledged." Forgiven? I didn't know yet, but acknowledged that I could do. That Sunday, I went to the garden center and bought 2 rose bushes, one white, one deep red. I planted them in the backyard where the light lasted longest, gloves on, hands firm in the soil. Clara helped me with the digging. We didn't speak much, just worked. After we finished, we stood back, looking at the new roots we'd laid down. "Why 2?" she asked. "One for what I've lost," I said, "and one for what I'm keeping." She didn't ask which was which. She didn't need to. As the sun dipped low, I felt something shift. Not closure, not peace. Just space. Space to begin again. And for the first time in months, I slept without waking once. It's been 5 months now. The mailbox no longer brings dread. The phone rings, and I answer it without holding my breath. The locks haven't changed since December, and I haven't opened the strongbox in weeks. The house is quiet, not with fear, but with peace. The kind of quiet you earn after walking through fire barefoot, and finding your own feet still whole. Clara visits every Sunday. We prune the roses, sip coffee, argue gently about books. She started teaching a community course on digital privacy for seniors. She credits me for the idea. I don't argue. The garden is doing well. The white rose bush bloomed first, strong and early. The red one took longer. Its first flower came late, almost shy. But when it opened, it was the deepest red I'd ever seen. Fierce. Honest. People still ask if I've heard from Justin. I haven't, and I don't know if I will. What I know is this. My love for him remains, but it's no longer blind. It doesn't excuse or ignore or cover up. It stands at a distance now, not because I chose to punish, but because I chose to protect. Myself, my name, my life. It took 78 years for me to learn that saying no isn't unkind. That drawing a line isn't selfish. That survival sometimes means turning the lock and keeping it turned. They don't tell you how quiet betrayal can be, how polite, how reasonable it sounds when spoken in the voice of someone you once rocked to sleep. But now I know. And maybe you do too. Maybe you've had someone show up smiling, holding croissants and speaking of love while reaching quietly for your keys. Maybe you've stayed silent, thinking it would pass. It won't. But you can. You can outlive the lie. You can speak the truth, first in your own kitchen, then in a courtroom, then in every place that once held your silence. And if this story feels like yours, even a little, then let it remind you. You are not a burden. You are not something to be signed away. You are still here, still standing. And no one, not blood, not paper, not time, can take that from you without your say. So if you're reading this and your hands are trembling the way mine once did, tell your story, or tell mine. And if it gave you courage, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs to hear it, or just say, I see you. Because that's where healing starts, not in court, not in victory, but in being seen.